The bitter December wind howled through the New Mexico territory. As Bennett Xavier rode into the outskirts of Abiquiu in 1878, never expecting that the heap of dark fabric huddled against a snowdrift would change everything he thought he knew about his solitary life. At first, he assumed it was just discarded clothing or perhaps a wounded animal. But as his horse drew closer, he saw the trembling of shoulders beneath a threadbare shawl and heard the soft, broken sound of weeping. Bennett dismounted quickly, his boots crunching in the fresh snow, and knelt beside the figure. When she lifted her face, he saw eyes the color of creek water in summer, red-rimmed from crying and surrounded by skin pale as the snow itself. "Madam." His voice was rough from days of riding but gentle. "What are you doing out here? You'll freeze to death." She tried to speak, but her teeth chattered so violently that no words would come. Her lips had taken on a bluish tint, and her fingers, visible through torn gloves, were white with cold. Bennett did not hesitate. He shrugged off his heavy sheepskin coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, then lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light, as though she had not eaten properly in days or perhaps weeks. "I've got you now," he murmured, carrying her toward his horse. "You'll never be cold or alone again. That's a promise." She did not resist, perhaps could not resist, as he mounted his horse with her cradled against his chest, and turned toward the small ranch he called home, about 2 miles from town. The ride felt endless as he felt her shivering against him, her body trying desperately to generate warmth it did not have. His ranch house was modest, built of adobe and wood, with a stone fireplace that he kept well stocked during the winter months. He kicked the door open and carried her straight to the hearth, where embers still glowed from the morning fire. Setting her gently in his grandmother's old rocking chair, he quickly built up the fire until flames crackled and danced, throwing heat into the small room. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked as he pulled off her frozen boots, revealing stockings with more holes than fabric. He rubbed her feet carefully, trying to restore circulation without causing pain. "Eleanor," she whispered finally, her voice hoarse. "Eleanor Dalton. I'm Bennett Xavier. This is my ranch." "You're safe here, Eleanor." He continued working on her feet, then moved to her hands, chafing them between his own work-roughened palms. "How long were you out there?" "Since last night," she admitted, her eyes filling with fresh tears. "I had nowhere else to go." Bennett felt anger rise in his chest, not at her, but at whatever circumstances had left a young woman alone and freezing in the snow. "Let me make you some hot coffee and food. Then, if you're able, you can tell me what happened." He moved to the kitchen area of his single-room house, grateful now for the habit of always keeping supplies on hand. He heated leftover stew from the pot that hung over the fire and poured coffee that he fortified with a generous splash of whiskey. When he brought these to Eleanor, she accepted them with trembling hands, and he had to help her hold the cup steady as she took her first sips. The color began returning to her face as the heat from the fire and the warm food reached her core. Bennett pulled up a stool and sat nearby, giving her space but staying close enough to help if needed. He studied her now in the firelight. She was perhaps 22 or 23, with dark hair that hung in damp tangles around her shoulders and features that would be lovely once they were no longer pinched with cold and hunger. "I came here with my uncle," Eleanor began, her voice growing stronger as warmth returned to her body. 3 months ago, he had a claim, a small piece of land outside town. He was going to raise cattle, he said, and I could keep house for him. My parents died last year back in Missouri, both of them from fever within a week of each other. My uncle was the only family I had left. Was. Bennett caught the past tense. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. He died 4 days ago. His horse threw him and he hit his head on a rock. He never woke up. I buried him as best I could in the half-frozen ground, but I could not work the claim alone, and I had no money. The supplies were almost gone. I went into town yesterday, hoping to find work, any work at all. Let me guess, Bennett said grimly. The respectable places would not hire a woman alone, and the other places wanted you for things you would not do. She nodded miserably. The saloon owner said he would give me room and board if I would work upstairs. I refused and left. I tried the general store, the boarding house, even the livery stable. No one wanted to take a chance on someone like me, a woman with no references, no family, no one to vouch for her character. By the time evening came, I realized I had nowhere to sleep. The boarding house would not even let me stay one night without payment in advance. So you walked out of town and just sat down in the snow. Bennett could not keep the incredulity from his voice. I did not know what else to do, Eleanor whispered. I thought perhaps it would be quick, that I would just fall asleep and not wake up. It seemed better than the alternative. Bennett stood abruptly and paced to the window, looking out at the snow that had begun falling again. He was 26 years old and had been alone on this ranch for 3 years, ever since his parents had decided to return east to live near his sister and her growing family. They had signed the ranch over to him, trusting him to make something of it. He had done well enough, raising horses and doing occasional work for the larger ranches nearby. But it was a solitary life, and there had been many nights when the silence of the house felt oppressive. He turned back to Eleanor. I meant what I said out there. You will never be cold or alone again, not if I have anything to say about it. You can stay here. Her eyes widened. I cannot do that. It would not be proper. People would talk. People always talk, Bennett said flatly. Especially in a small town like Abiquiu. But I am offering you honest work and a safe place to sleep, nothing more. I need help around this ranch and you need a home. We can help each other. But where would I sleep? This is just one room. Bennett had already thought of that. I have a small barn with a tack room. It has a stove for cold nights when animals need watching. I'll fix it up proper for myself, and you can have the house. We'll be perfectly respectable, separate buildings and all. Eleanor stared at him for a long moment, and Bennett could see her weighing her options, realizing as he had that she truly had none. Why would you do this for a stranger? My mother would haunt me for eternity if I turned away someone in need, Bennett said simply. And beyond that, it's just the right thing to do. A person should not have to choose between dying in the snow and selling themselves, not when there are other options. I can work hard, Eleanor said quickly. I am a good cook, and I can clean and mend and tend animals. I helped my mother with everything before she died. I will earn my keep. I do not doubt it, Bennett replied. But for tonight, you just rest and get warm. Tomorrow is soon enough to worry about work. He showed her where his parents' old bedroom was, separated from the main room by a curtain. It had a proper bed with quilts his grandmother had made decades ago. Eleanor protested that he should keep his own room, but Bennett would not hear of it. He gathered what he needed for the night and headed out to the barn, pausing at the door. Eleanor, lock this behind me. You'll feel safer that way. Her eyes shimmered with gratitude. Thank you, Bennett. I will not forget this kindness. As he trudged through the snow to the barn, Bennett wondered what he had just gotten himself into. Abiquiu was not a large town, perhaps 200 souls all told, and everyone knew everyone else's business. By tomorrow afternoon, the whole territory would know he had a woman living on his ranch. There would be talk, probably plenty of it, but he found he did not much care. Something about Eleanor's tears in the snow had struck straight to his heart, and he knew he could not have ridden past her even if he had wanted to. The tack room was small but serviceable. He got the stove going and laid out his bedroll on the wooden floor. It was not comfortable, but he had slept in worse places during his years working cattle drives. As he lay there listening to the wind howl around the barn, he thought about Eleanor's face, the way her eyes had looked so lost and hopeless before hope had crept back in. He wanted to keep that hope alive, wanted to protect her from whatever harshness the world might throw at her next. It was a dangerous feeling, he knew, but he could not seem to help it. Morning came cold and bright. Bennett woke early out of long habit and tended to the horses before heading to the house. He knocked softly, not wanting to startle Eleanor, and heard her call for him to enter. She had clearly been awake for some time. The fire was built up, coffee was brewing, and she had found the supplies to make biscuits, which were browning nicely in the Dutch oven. "You did not have to do all this," Bennett said, but he was pleased. The house already felt warmer, more lived in than it had in months. "I told you I would earn my keep," Eleanor replied. She looked better this morning, with color in her cheeks and her hair braided neatly down her back. She wore the same dress as yesterday, but she had obviously done her best to clean and mend it. "Besides, I have been awake since dawn. I am used to rising early." They sat down to breakfast together, and Bennett found himself enjoying the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with another person. Eleanor had cooked the biscuits perfectly, and she served them with butter and preserves he had bought from a neighbor months ago and never opened. "I need to go into town today," Bennett said as they ate. "I have to pick up supplies and deliver a horse I sold to the banker." "Would you like to come along, or would you prefer to stay here?" Eleanor hesitated. "I am not sure I am ready to face the people of Abiquiu just yet. Yesterday was so humiliating." "I understand. But Eleanor, you did nothing wrong. You hold your head up when you go into that town, you hear me? You have nothing to be ashamed of." She smiled at him, and Bennett felt something shift in his chest. It was a beautiful smile, warm and genuine despite all she had been through. "Thank you for saying that, but I think I would rather stay here today if that is all right. There is much I can do here to help." "Fair enough. I should be back by early afternoon." True to his word, Bennett returned just after noon, his wagon loaded with supplies. But he was not alone. A stern-looking woman with steel-gray hair sat beside him on the wagon seat, and she climbed down before Bennett could even help her. "Eleanor Dalton," the woman called out as Eleanor emerged from the house, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I am Margaret Winters. I run the boarding house in town." Eleanor's face went pale. "Yes, madam, I remember you. I expect you do, and I expect you remember I turned you away yesterday. I am here to apologize for that and to bring you these." Margaret pulled several wrapped bundles from the wagon. "These are dresses and other necessaries. I also brought fabric if you prefer to make your own clothes." Eleanor looked stunned. "I do not understand," Margaret sighed. "Bennett here came into town and made it very clear to several of us that we should be ashamed of ourselves for turning away a young woman in need. He was right. I pride myself on being a Christian woman, but I failed to act like one yesterday. I am sorry." "I did not mean to cause trouble," Eleanor said quickly, glancing at Bennett. "You did not cause anything," Bennett said firmly. "I simply reminded people of their duty to their neighbors." "He did more than that," Margaret said with a slight smile. "He made it clear that you are under his protection and that anyone who treats you poorly will answer to him. Half the town is scandalized, and the other half is impressed by his boldness." Eleanor's cheeks flushed. "I do not want to be the source of gossip." "Too late for that, dear," Margaret said, not unkindly. "But gossip fades when people see that you are respectable and hardworking, which is why I have come to offer you work as well. 2 days a week, you come to my boarding house and help with the heavy cleaning and laundry. I will pay you fair wages. That way, you are not solely dependent on Bennett's charity and people can see you are employed." Bennett watched Eleanor carefully. He saw the emotions playing across her face: relief, gratitude, lingering fear, and something else he could not quite name. "That is very kind of you, Mrs. Winters. I accept your offer." "Good. We will start next week. That gives you time to settle in here first." Margaret handed the bundles to Eleanor. "Now I will leave you both to your work. Bennett, your mother would be proud of what you did today." After Margaret left, Eleanor turned to Bennett. "What exactly did you say in town?" Bennett shrugged, suddenly feeling uncomfortable. "I may have spoken to a few people about the way you were treated, and I may have suggested that anyone in this territory who considers themselves decent should be willing to help someone who is trying to help themselves. You stood up for me." Eleanor's voice was soft with wonder. "A stranger you just met last night." "You are not a stranger anymore," Bennett said simply. "You are my friend, and friends look out for each other." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that went deeper than mere friendship, though neither was ready to acknowledge it yet. Eleanor looked away first, clutching the bundles to her chest. "I should go through these and see what needs to be altered to fit." As the days passed into weeks, a comfortable routine developed on the ranch. Eleanor proved to be as hardworking as she had claimed. She managed the house beautifully, keeping it clean and warm and filling it with the smells of home-cooked meals. She helped Bennett with the horses, showing a natural way with animals that impressed him. She started a small garden area, planning for spring planting, and began organizing the chaos of his barn and storage areas. Bennett, true to his word, slept in the tack room. But he found himself spending more and more time in the house, drawn by Eleanor's presence and conversation. They talked as they worked, sharing stories of their lives. Bennett learned about Eleanor's childhood in Missouri, her parents' general store, her love of reading, and her dream of maybe teaching school someday. Eleanor learned about Bennett's years working cattle drives, his decision to settle down and raise horses, his close relationship with his sister back east. The more Bennett learned about Eleanor, the more he admired her. She had a quiet strength that belied her gentle manner, a determination that had kept her going even when all hope seemed lost. She was also funny, with a dry wit that caught him off guard and made him laugh more than he had in years. For Eleanor's part, she found herself watching Bennett when he did not know she was looking. She admired the way he treated his animals, with firmness but also kindness. She noticed how he always thought of her comfort, making sure she had enough firewood, checking that she was not working too hard. He never made improper advances or said anything that made her uncomfortable. He was, she thought, the most genuinely good man she had ever met. Christmas came, and Bennett surprised Eleanor by bringing home a small pine tree that he set up in the corner of the house. "I know it is not much," he said almost shyly, "but my mother always said a house needed a Christmas tree." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. She had thought this Christmas would be one of the worst of her life, spent alone and grieving all she had lost. Instead, she was warm and safe with a friend who cared about her happiness. "It is perfect," she whispered. They decorated the tree with strings of popcorn and dried berries, and Eleanor sewed small ornaments from scraps of fabric. On Christmas morning, Bennett gave her a beautiful leather-bound journal he had ordered from Santa Fe. "You mentioned you liked to write," he said. "I thought you might enjoy this." Eleanor had knitted him a warm scarf in secret, working on it late at night after he had gone to the barn. When he unwrapped it, his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "This is the finest scarf I have ever owned," he declared, wrapping it around his neck immediately despite being indoors by the fire. They spent the day together, cooking a special meal and simply enjoying each other's company. As evening fell and they sat by the fire, Eleanor felt a contentment she had not known in over a year. She glanced at Bennett, who was whittling a new handle for a tool, his face peaceful in the firelight. "Bennett," she said softly. He looked up. "Yes, I just wanted to say thank you. For everything. For saving my life, for giving me a home, for treating me with respect and kindness. I do not know what I did to deserve such goodness, but I am grateful for it every single day." Bennett set down his whittling and looked at her seriously. "Eleanor, you deserve all of that and more. I am the one who should be thanking you. This house has not felt like a home since my parents left, not until you came. You have brought light and warmth and life to it and to me. I am grateful that I found you that night, and I am grateful that you chose to stay." Their eyes held for a long moment, and Eleanor felt her heart beat faster. She recognized the feeling that had been growing in her for weeks now, but she was afraid to name it, afraid that doing so might shatter the peace they had found together. Winter deepened, and the people of Abiquiu grew accustomed to seeing Eleanor and Bennett together. She worked her 2 days at the boarding house, and Margaret reported to anyone who would listen that Eleanor was the best helper she had ever had. Gradually, other people in town began offering Eleanor work as well. She took in mending, did laundry for families who could afford to pay for such services, and occasionally helped the doctor's wife with nursing tasks. The wages she earned, she insisted on contributing to the household, though Bennett tried to refuse them. "I pay my own way," she said firmly. "You have given me a home, but I will not be a charity case." "You were never that," Bennett protested, but he saw the pride in her eyes and understood it. So he accepted her contributions, and they became true partners in running the ranch. As January turned to February, the weather remained harsh, but the days slowly began to lengthen. Bennett found himself thinking more and more about the future, about what would happen when spring came and the world opened up again. Would Eleanor want to stay, or would she wish to move on, perhaps to a city where there were more opportunities for a single woman? The thought of her leaving made his chest tight with anxiety. Somewhere along the way, Eleanor had become essential to him, as necessary as air and water. He woke each morning eager to see her face, and he went to sleep each night thinking of her smile. He knew he was in love with her, had probably been in love with her since that first night when she had looked at him with those creek water eyes and accepted his help. But he did not know how to tell her, did not know if she felt the same way. She was kind to him, certainly, and she seemed happy in their life together. But that did not necessarily mean she loved him. It might simply mean she was grateful or comfortable or content with the security he provided. Eleanor, working in the house and going about her daily tasks, was wrestling with similar thoughts. She knew she was in love with Bennett, had been for weeks now, but she did not know if he saw her as anything more than a friend or a partner in running the ranch. He had never tried to kiss her or touch her inappropriately, which she appreciated, but it also left her uncertain about his feelings. She was also acutely aware that she owed him everything. He had saved her life, given her a home, protected her from gossip and worse. How could she tell him she loved him without it seeming like she was only trying to secure her position, or worse, repaying a debt? The tension between them grew as February progressed, though neither spoke of it. They were careful with each other, almost too polite, as though afraid that one wrong word might shatter the equilibrium they had achieved. The break came on a day in late February when Bennett returned from town with news. He dismounted and came into the house, his face serious. Eleanor looked up from the bread she was kneading, her heart sinking at his expression. "What is wrong?" she asked. Bennett took off his hat and turned it in his hands. "I heard something in town today about your uncle's land claim. What about it?" "Someone named Harrison Drake has filed a claim on it. He is saying that since your uncle died and had no heirs, the land reverted to open territory. He is a lawyer from Santa Fe, apparently, and he knows how to work the system. Eleanor's hand stilled in the bread dough. But I am my uncle's heir. The land should pass to me. Do you have documentation of that? A will or legal papers showing your relationship? Eleanor's face fell. No, my uncle did not believe in such things. He said family was family, and that was all that mattered. And after my parents died so quickly, there was no time to settle their affairs properly. I just came west with my uncle because I had nowhere else to go. Bennett cursed softly. Then Drake might be able to take the land. Without proof of your relationship or your uncle's intentions, you have no legal standing. Let him have it, Eleanor said bitterly. What would I do with land anyway? I cannot work a claim by myself, and the cabin was barely standing when I left it. That's not the point, Bennett said. It is your property, your inheritance. We should fight for it. Why? Eleanor asked, her voice rising with emotion. What difference does it make? I have a home here, a life here. I do not need that land. Don't you? Bennett challenged. Eleanor, you have been working yourself to exhaustion, taking every job offered, saving every penny. I have seen you counting your wages late at night. You are trying to build independence, security of your own. That land could give you that. You could sell it, invest the money, have something that is truly yours. I could, Eleanor agreed. Or I could let it go and accept that I have more here than I ever had there. I have a home, I have work, I have a friend who cares about me. Why should I risk losing all of that by fighting for a piece of land that holds nothing but sad memories? You would not lose this, Bennett said, his voice urgent. Eleanor, you will always have a home here. Always. Even if you owned 100 acres of your own, you would still have a place here with me. Would I? Eleanor turned to face him fully, her hands dusted with flour, her eyes bright with unshed tears. For how long, Bennett? Until you decide to marry. Until your wife does not want another woman living on your property. Until you grow tired of supporting someone who is not truly family. Bennett stared at her. Is that what you think? That I see you as a burden? That I would just turn you out when it became inconvenient? I think you are a good man who did a kind thing for someone in need, Eleanor said, her voice shaking. But I also think that kindness cannot last forever. Eventually, you will want your own life, your own family, and I will be in the way. Then marry me, Bennett said. The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor's mouth fell open in shock, and Bennett looked equally stunned by what had come out of his own mouth. But now that the words were spoken, he could not take them back, and he found he did not want to. Marry me, he said again, more firmly this time. He crossed the room to her, taking her flour-dusted hands in his. Eleanor, I love you. I have loved you for weeks now, maybe from that first night when you looked at me with such hope and fear mixed together. I wake up every morning grateful that I found you, and I go to sleep every night thanking God that you stayed. You are not a burden or a charity case or someone I am being kind to. You are the woman I love, and I want you to be my wife. Eleanor's tears spilled over, running down her cheeks. You love me, with everything I am, Bennett said simply. I know this is not the most romantic proposal. I should have planned it better, should have done it properly. But the thought of you believing I would ever turn you away or that you are not wanted here, I cannot bear it. So yes, I love you, and yes, I want to marry you if you will have me. Eleanor laughed through her tears. If I will have you, Bennett, you are the best man I have ever known. You saved my life and then gave me a reason to want to live it. Of course I will marry you. I love you too. I have been so afraid to say it, afraid that you would think I was only grateful or trying to secure my position. But it is not that at all. I love you for who you are, for your kindness and strength and the way you make me laugh. I love the life we have built together, and I want to keep building it for the rest of our days. Bennett pulled her into his arms, and they held each other tightly, both of them shaking with emotion. Then Bennett pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough. "Please," Eleanor whispered. Their first kiss was soft and sweet, tentative as they learned the shape and feel of each other. But it quickly deepened as weeks of suppressed longing broke free. Bennett cupped Eleanor's face in his hands, kissing her like she was precious and fragile and essential all at once. Eleanor wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing close to him, finally allowing herself to feel everything she had been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Bennett rested his forehead against hers. "I promise you, Eleanor, you will never be cold or alone again, not for the rest of your life. I will keep you warm and safe and loved always." "I know," Eleanor said, smiling up at him. "I have known that since the night you found me. That is why I fell in love with you." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Abiquiu. Margaret Winters stood up with Eleanor, and the banker, a friend of Bennett's, stood with him. The whole town turned out for the wedding, curious to see the conclusion of the romance that had scandalized and charmed them in equal measure. Eleanor wore a dress that Margaret and several other women of the town had helped her make, a beautiful blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. Bennett wore his best suit and looked so handsome that Eleanor's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the altar. They spoke their vows clearly and firmly, promises made before God and community. When the minister declared them husband and wife, Bennett kissed Eleanor with a joy that made the assembled crowd cheer and applaud. The reception was held at the boarding house, and the people of Abiquiu brought food and gifts to celebrate the union. Eleanor was overwhelmed by the kindness shown to her, the acceptance from people who had turned her away just months before. "You see," Bennett murmured in her ear as they danced together, "you were never alone. You just had not found your place yet." "I found more than a place," Eleanor said, looking up at her husband with love shining in her eyes. "I found my home." That night, Bennett carried Eleanor over the threshold of the house that was now truly theirs. They had cleaned out the tack room in the barn, and Bennett had moved all his things back into the house. There was no need for separate living quarters anymore. They were husband and wife, and they would share everything from this point forward. As spring arrived and the land began to thaw, Bennett and Eleanor worked together to expand the ranch. They bought more horses and built new corrals. Eleanor's garden flourished under her careful tending, and she began to sell vegetables to people in town. Bennett's horse breeding program became well known in the territory, and buyers came from as far as Santa Fe to purchase his stock. The question of Eleanor's uncle's land resolved itself when Harrison Drake came to call one day in April. He was a thin man with calculating eyes, but he greeted Eleanor and Bennett politely enough. "I heard you married," he said to Eleanor. "Congratulations, Mrs. Xavier. I wanted to speak with you about your uncle's property." "What about it?" Eleanor asked, her hand finding Bennett's. "I have filed a claim on it, as you may have heard, but I am a reasonable man. If you can provide proof of your relationship to the deceased, I will withdraw my claim. I have no wish to cheat anyone out of their rightful inheritance." "I have no papers," Eleanor said. My uncle did not believe in such formalities. Drake nodded as if he had expected this. "Then I must continue with my claim. However, I am prepared to offer you a sum for your verbal agreement not to contest it, $500. Bennett whistled softly. It was a substantial amount, more than many people in the territory saw in a year. "That is generous," he admitted. "The land is worth more," Drake said frankly. "But without legal proof, Mrs. Xavier would spend far more than $500 fighting a claim she would likely lose. This way, everyone benefits. I get the land and she gets compensation for her loss." Eleanor looked at Bennett, who squeezed her hand. "It is your decision," he said softly. Whatever you choose, I will support you." Eleanor thought about the land, about the small cabin where her uncle had died, about the dreams that had brought her to New Mexico in the first place. Then she looked around at the ranch she and Bennett were building together, at the life they had created from nothing. She did not need her uncle's land. She had everything she wanted right here. "I accept your offer, Mr. Drake," she said. $500 and the land is yours." They signed the papers that same day, and Drake left them a bank note for the agreed-upon amount. After he was gone, Eleanor and Bennett sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over their land. "Any regrets?" Bennett asked. "None," Eleanor said firmly. "That land was part of my past, but this ranch is my future. Our future. I choose to look forward, not back." Bennett kissed her temple. "Have I mentioned today that I love you?" "Only 3 times," Eleanor said with a smile, "but I will never tire of hearing it." "Good. Because I plan to tell you every single day for the rest of our lives." Summer arrived, hot and bright, and with it came a letter from Bennett's sister in Ohio. She wrote that their parents were in poor health and asking for Bennett to visit if he could manage it. Bennett showed the letter to Eleanor, and she saw the worry in his eyes. "We should go," she said immediately. "Your parents need to see you, and I would like to meet them, plus your sister and her family." "It is a long journey," Bennett warned. "Weeks each way and expensive." "We have the money from Mr. Drake's payment," Eleanor pointed out. "And the ranch can survive a few months without us. We can ask our neighbors to check on the animals. This is family, Bennett. Family is important." So they made arrangements for the journey, leaving the ranch in the capable hands of a young couple from town who wanted to gain experience before starting their own homestead. The trip east was indeed long and tiring, but Eleanor found it exciting as well. She had never traveled much beyond Missouri, and she marveled at the changing landscape as they moved from the dry Southwest to the greener lands of the Midwest, and finally to the rolling hills of Ohio. Bennett's parents welcomed them with open arms. His mother embraced Eleanor like a long-lost daughter, and his father shook Bennett's hand with obvious pride. "You did well, son," he said, looking at Eleanor approvingly. "Very well indeed." Bennett's sister Sarah was equally warm, and her 3 children immediately adopted Eleanor as their favorite aunt. They spent 6 weeks in Ohio, and Eleanor came to understand Bennett better by seeing where he had come from. His parents were good people, practical and hardworking but with generous hearts. Sarah was cheerful and energetic, running her household with the same efficiency that Eleanor brought to the ranch. During the visit, Bennett's mother took Eleanor aside one day. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" Eleanor asked, surprised. "For loving my son, for giving him a reason to smile again. When we left New Mexico, I worried about him being alone out there. But now I see he is not alone at all. He has you, and he has built a life worth living. That is all a mother can ask for her child." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "I am the one who should be thanking you. You raised a man who saved my life in every way that matters. I am grateful to you for that every single day." The older woman hugged her tightly. "You are exactly what he needed. I see that clearly. You two will have a good life together." "We already do," Eleanor said softly. When it came time to leave Ohio and return west, the parting was bittersweet. Bennett's parents were clearly in declining health, and Bennett worried that he might not see them again. But they urged him not to grieve for them prematurely. "We have lived good lives," his father said firmly. "And now we can rest easy knowing you are settled and happy. That is all we ever wanted for you. Go home, Bennett, and live your life with joy. That will make us happier than any amount of worrying would." The journey back to New Mexico felt longer than the journey out, perhaps because they were both eager to return to their ranch and their life. When they finally crested the rise that gave them their first view of home, Eleanor felt her heart lift with gladness. "I did not realize how much I had missed it," she said, looking at the familiar buildings, the corrals, the land stretching out under the wide southwestern sky. "Neither did I," Bennett admitted. "I have always loved this place, but coming back to it with you, knowing you love it too, that makes it even better." They returned to find that everything had been well managed in their absence. The young couple had taken excellent care of the animals and the property, and they left with payment and references that would help them secure their own land. As fall arrived and the air grew crisp again, Eleanor realized she had now been with Bennett for nearly a year. It seemed impossible that so much time had passed, and yet it also seemed as though she had been with him forever, as though her life before that snowy night had happened to someone else entirely. She was hanging laundry one October morning when she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She sat down quickly on the porch step, breathing deeply until the feeling passed. It was the third morning in a row that this had happened, and Eleanor was beginning to suspect she knew the reason why. When Bennett came in for lunch, she was waiting for him with a smile on her face. "I have something to tell you," she said. "What is it?" Bennett washed his hands and came to sit beside her at the table. "I think I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." Bennett's face went through a series of expressions so quickly that Eleanor almost laughed. Shock, joy, fear, and wonder all chased each other across his features. "Are you certain?" he finally asked. "I am going to visit the doctor's wife tomorrow to confirm it, but yes, I am fairly certain. All the signs are there." Bennett whooped with joy and swept Eleanor up in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen. "We are going to have a baby. Eleanor, this is wonderful." "Careful," she laughed, clinging to him. "You will make me dizzy." He set her down gently, immediately contrite. "I am sorry. I need to be more careful now. You need to rest more. You should not be working so hard." "I am pregnant, not fragile," Eleanor said, amused by his sudden concern. "Women have babies all the time and manage just fine." But Bennett was not to be deterred. He insisted on taking over the heavier chores, and he fussed over Eleanor constantly, making sure she was eating enough and resting enough. Eleanor tolerated his hovering with good-natured patience, knowing it came from love. The doctor's wife confirmed Eleanor's suspicions. She was indeed pregnant, and the baby would likely arrive in late spring. The news spread through Abiquiu quickly, and the women of the town rallied around Eleanor, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes and cribs. Margaret Winters, in particular, took Eleanor under her wing. "I never had children of my own," she admitted, "but I have helped deliver enough of them to know what to expect. You come to me if you have any questions or concerns at all." As winter settled in again, Eleanor spent many evenings sitting by the fire with Bennett, knitting small garments for the baby. Bennett worked on building a cradle, taking great care to sand every surface smooth so there would be no splinters to harm delicate skin. "What do you hope for?" Eleanor asked one night. "A boy or a girl, I do not care as long as the baby is healthy and you come through the birth safely," Bennett said seriously. "That is all I ask." "But if you could choose," Bennett considered. "A boy would be wonderful. I could teach him to ride and work the ranch. But a girl would be wonderful too. I would spoil her terribly, I know it. So truly, Eleanor, I do not have a preference. I will love any child of ours beyond measure." Eleanor smiled and reached for his hand. "I think you will be a wonderful father." "I hope so. I want to give our children everything my parents gave me. A home filled with love, security, the freedom to follow their dreams. I want them to know they are valued and cherished." "They will know," Eleanor assured him. "How could they not with you as their father?" Winter passed slowly. Eleanor grew round with the baby, and Bennett's protectiveness increased proportionally. He hated leaving her alone even for short periods, though Eleanor insisted she was perfectly fine. The other women of Abiquiu visited regularly, and Eleanor was never actually alone for long. When spring arrived, Eleanor was enormous and uncomfortable. She could no longer help with many of the ranch chores, which frustrated her even though Bennett assured her repeatedly that everything was under control. She spent her days preparing the house for the baby, washing tiny clothes and organizing the small nursery area they had set up in the corner of their bedroom. The baby came on a warm May morning, arriving after a long night of labor that terrified Bennett. Margaret Winters and the doctor's wife attended the birth, and they sent Bennett outside to pace in the yard, claiming he was making Eleanor nervous with his hovering. "But I want to be with her," he protested. "And you will be as soon as the baby is born," Margaret said firmly. "But right now, you need to let us work. Go." So Bennett paced and worried and prayed, listening to the sounds from inside the house and feeling more helpless than he ever had in his life. It seemed like an eternity before Margaret finally opened the door, her face wreathed in smiles. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy boy with a fine set of lungs, and Eleanor is tired but doing well." Bennett rushed past her into the house. Eleanor lay in their bed, her hair damp with sweat but her face glowing with joy. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was the smallest person Bennett had ever seen. His son. "Meet your papa," Eleanor said softly, smiling up at Bennett. Bennett sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. He had a cap of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face, and he was the most beautiful thing Bennett had ever seen. "He is perfect," he breathed. "He is," Eleanor agreed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never reached a decision. Now, looking at his son, Bennett knew. "Benjamin," he said. "After my father, Benjamin James Xavier." "Benjamin," Eleanor tested the name. "I like it. Hello, Benjamin. Welcome to the world, little one." Baby Benjamin was not an easy infant. He cried often and slept only in short bursts, leaving both Eleanor and Bennett exhausted. But neither of them minded. They took turns walking the floor with him at night, singing to him and rocking him and marveling at how someone so small could command so much of their attention and love. As spring turned to summer and Benjamin began to settle into more of a routine, life on the ranch found a new rhythm. Eleanor learned to work with a baby on her hip or napping nearby in a basket. Bennett discovered that he could do barn chores one-handed while holding a sleeping infant. "I never knew it was possible to love someone this much," Eleanor said one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set while Benjamin nursed. "Neither did I," Bennett agreed. "Well, I knew I loved you that much, but somehow having Benjamin has made my heart even bigger." "I did not know that was possible." Eleanor leaned against his shoulder. "We have built such a good life together, haven't we? Sometimes I think about that night when you found me in the snow, and I can hardly believe this is the same world. Everything has changed so completely." "You changed it," Bennett said. "You brought light and love and life to a place that was just empty before. You are the center of everything good in my world, Eleanor." "And you are mine," she said softly. "You saved me, Bennett, but you also gave me a reason to want to be saved. You gave me hope when I had none, and you built a future with me when I could not see past the next day. I love you more than words can express." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and the stars emerged. Inside the house, Bennett's cradle sat waiting for when Benjamin would sleep in his own bed. But for now, they kept him close, wanting to savor every moment of his tiny infancy. The years passed with surprising speed. Benjamin grew from a fussy infant into a cheerful toddler and then into an energetic young boy. When he was 3, Eleanor gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Emma Grace. 2 years after that, another son arrived whom they called James after Bennett's father. The ranch prospered along with the family. Bennett's horses became famous throughout New Mexico and into neighboring territories. Eleanor expanded her garden into a true farm operation, selling produce and preserved goods to several stores in the region. They hired help as needed, often giving work to people who were struggling, remembering all too well how Eleanor had once needed such help herself. The children grew up secure and loved, exactly as Bennett had hoped. Benjamin proved to have his father's way with horses and his mother's quiet determination. Emma was clever and curious, always asking questions and wanting to understand how things worked. James was the charmer, with a ready smile and a gift for making people laugh. When Benjamin was 10, Emma 7, and James 5, a letter arrived that Bennett had been dreading. His sister wrote that their father had passed away peacefully in his sleep, and their mother had followed him just 3 days later, unable to face life without her partner of 40 years. Bennett grieved, but it was a gentle grief, tempered by the knowledge that his parents had lived full lives and had left the world knowing their children were happy and settled. He took comfort in Eleanor's steady presence and in his children, who reminded him daily of the continuity of life and love. "Your parents would be so proud of you," Eleanor said as they stood together looking at the family plot where they would someday be buried. "Proud of what you have built, of the man you are, of the family we have created together." "They knew you, at least," Bennett said. "They got to see that I had found happiness. That means everything to me." As the children grew older, they each found their own paths. Benjamin, as expected, took to ranching with enthusiasm, working alongside his father and learning everything Bennett could teach him. Emma surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for mathematics and business, taking over the financial management of the ranch and proving to be sharper at it than either of her parents. James, to no one's surprise, became the social heart of the family. He made friends easily in town and proved to be a natural negotiator, helping to broker deals for the ranch's horses and Eleanor's farm products. He also inherited his father's protective streak and his mother's compassion, always ready to help someone in need. The children all eventually married and had families of their own. Benjamin brought home a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, and they built a house on Xavier land. Emma married a teacher from Santa Fe, and they divided their time between the city and the ranch. James married late, to a widow with 2 children whom he adopted as his own, and they made their home in Abiquiu proper, where James opened a general store. Through it all, Bennett and Eleanor remained the center of the growing Xavier clan. Their house was always full of grandchildren, noise, and laughter. Eleanor continued to garden until her hands became too arthritic to work the soil effectively, at which point her grandchildren took over, growing vegetables under her watchful eye and instruction. Bennett bred horses well into his 60s, finally slowing down only when his back and knees began to protest the physical labor. Even then, he spent hours in the corrals with his grandchildren, teaching them what he knew and delighting in their enthusiasm. On a winter evening in 1918, 40 years after that snowy night when they first met, Bennett and Eleanor sat together on their porch wrapped in blankets against the cold. They were both in their mid-60s now, their hair gray and their faces lined, but their love had only deepened with time. "Do you remember," Eleanor said softly, "what you said to me that first night?" "I said a lot of things," Bennett replied with a smile. "Which part are you thinking of? You said I would never be cold or alone again," Eleanor reminded him. "And you were right. Not for a single day in 40 years have I been either of those things." Bennett reached for her hand, his fingers still fitting perfectly between hers despite the arthritis that plagued them both. "Best promise I ever made," he said, "and the easiest one to keep. Loving you has been the simplest, most natural thing I have ever done." "I used to think," Eleanor mused, "that I was unlucky. My parents died, my uncle died, I almost froze to death in the snow. But now I see that I was the luckiest person alive. Because all of that led me to you and to this life and to our family. I would not change a single moment of it." "Neither would I," Bennett said. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "Eleanor, I want you to know something. When my time comes, whenever that is, I will leave this world with a heart full of gratitude. You gave me everything I never knew I needed. Love, family, purpose, joy. You made my life complete." "Don't talk about leaving," Eleanor said, squeezing his hand. "We have many years left together yet." "I hope so," Bennett agreed. "But whenever it comes, I wanted you to know, you are the best thing that ever happened to me." "And you to me," Eleanor whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder as she had done countless times over the decades. "My cowboy who found me weeping in the snow and gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." They sat together as darkness fell. Two people who had saved each other and built something beautiful from the ashes of loss and despair. Inside the house, they could hear the voices of grandchildren who were visiting, the sounds of dinner being prepared, all the noise and warmth of a family gathered together. Bennett and Eleanor lived several more good years, watching their grandchildren grow and welcoming great-grandchildren into the world. When Bennett finally passed away at 72, surrounded by his family in the house he had built, Eleanor grieved deeply, but found comfort in the legacy they had created together. She lived 2 more years without him, years filled with family and memories and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. When her own time came, she went peacefully in her sleep, and her children buried her next to Bennett on the hill overlooking the ranch, where they could rest together forever under the wide New Mexico sky. The Xavier Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through the family along with the story of how it all began, with a cowboy who found a woman weeping in the snow and made her a promise he kept for the rest of his life. It became a family legend, a reminder of the power of compassion and the transformative nature of love, a story told to each new generation as they grew up on the land that Bennett and Eleanor had built together. And in the town of Abiquiu, where people still remembered the scandal and the romance of that long-ago winter, Bennett and Eleanor were remembered as proof that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best, that kindness can change the world, and that true love, once found, lasts not just a lifetime but for all the lifetimes that follow. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the Xavier Ranch, still breed horses and grow vegetables in Eleanor's garden, still tell the story of the night that changed everything. And every winter, when the snow falls and the wind howls through the New Mexico territory, someone in the family remembers to say a quiet thank you for that long-ago storm that brought two souls together and started a legacy of love that continues still. The old house still stands, updated and expanded over the years, but with the original adobe walls that Bennett built and the stone fireplace where Eleanor once warmed herself on the worst night of her life. The rocking chair where Bennett first wrapped her in his coat is now an honored piece of family history, carefully preserved and passed down. And on the mantel sits the leather-bound journal Bennett gave Eleanor that first Christmas, its pages filled with her handwriting, documenting their life together in her own words. The last entry, written just days before Eleanor died, reads simply, "I found love when I thought I had lost everything. I found home when I had nowhere to go. I found Bennett when I needed him most, and he kept his promise. I was never cold or alone again. What a beautiful life it has been. And so the story ends where it began, with a promise made and kept, with love that conquered despair, with two people who saved each other and built something that lasted far beyond their own lives. In the end, that is perhaps the best anyone can hope for. To love and be loved, to build something worth keeping, and to leave the world a little better than we found it. Bennett Xavier and Eleanor Dalton Xavier did all of that and more. Their story, born in the snow and cold of a desperate night, bloomed into a warmth that spread through generations. They proved that sometimes the greatest love stories start with the simplest act of kindness, and that when two hearts are meant to find each other, not even death and despair can keep them apart. The ranch continues, the family continues, and the love continues, passed down like a precious heirloom from parent to child, from generation to generation. And somewhere, perhaps, under that wide New Mexico sky, two spirits rest together on their hill, holding hands for eternity, their promise finally and completely fulfilled.